Hello, everyone. This is Megan Grace, and
Bronwyn Simons.
it is January, and we are coming to you on the eve of January's new moon. It caught both of us off guard, and, but we're here and we're ready to bring you this first episode of New Moon Activation in 2021.
Yes, it's a whole new year, whole new series of new moon activations. I'm really excited to be here with all of you guys for a year that looks like it'll be more expansive and we'll have more good astrological news to share with you now that we have gotten through 2020.
Yeah. Where we left off, and I'd like to do just a tiny bit of a recap on that. Where we left off in December was this idea that it was a culmination of a lot of energies. We had in December the full moon, the winter solstice, and the great conjunction, which is a whole phenomenon in itself, a
Yeah.
rare one that doesn't happen often. But all
Mhm.
of those things were happening simultaneously. And we were recording our session just before that. And I was describing, well, what I think sounded like a, a mini dark night of the soul
Yeah.
moment, if you could call it that. And the analogy that I was working with was this idea of being in a river. And that to me is about this just wanting to be in the flow of life, as we all do. And when we're not, trying to understand what is taking you out of that flow.
Mhm.
And what the end of 2020, not all that long ago, was feeling like was that there were two forces kind of starting to come together. And the first force or the first face of God, is you just so beautiful. I cannot underscore how helpful that was to
Oh,
me.
good.
But the first kind of face of God that I was describing as feeling is the river banks and the way
Mhm.
that those have felt like they've been so constricting and sort of like tough love parenting happening
Mhm.
all throughout 2020. And it has felt a lot like the past year has been all about like somebody kind of forcing you to look at what you need to look at. You know,
Yeah.
wake up, pay attention, um, unearth what is been hidden in you,
Mhm.
hidden out there,
Yeah.
so that we could do some reconciling with it in the form of growing ourselves up, taking accountability, taking responsibility, so on and so forth. And then the other kind of thing that was apparent during that analogy was this fog light or this
Mhm.
glimmer of a light on the horizon, which is Jupiter or
Yeah.
the other face of God that was really kind of signaling,
Yeah.
everything's going to be okay.
Yeah.
And it was um, shortly after our last session, right on the heels of the Great Conjunction and the solstice
Yeah.
and all of that, where I just had this real kind of, I guess I'll call it come to Jesus moment or
Mhm.
something. Or in yoga, it would be like samadhi. And samadhi translates to me as clear seeing.
Mhm.
And it's a time where we just have this clarity that comes about when veils get ripped away, when
Yeah.
the places we haven't been able or willing to look at um, have been revealed, and the sources of wisdom and guidance that have always been there that we've been ignoring make themselves more present.
Yeah.
So I had this moment of, Saturn and Jupiter just feeling like, hey, we're both here,
Mhm.
we've got you. And it wasn't only a personal experience. It was this revel- revelation of really all of this is being held, all of humanity, all of our collective experience.
Yeah.
Not to say that it immediately turned us
Right.
around a corner, that we can't still see that there's still more work to do. And
Mm-hmm.
past week in the United States was
Mm-hmm.
a perfect example of, I guess, what I would describe it as is that now it feels like we're on the hinges
Yeah.
of a turning, going through a threshold or into a new way of being,
Yeah.
but there is still this unearthing that is
Yeah.
happening. So, so I just want to just give you a heartfelt thank you. I mean, it was such a tumultuous time for
Mm-hmm.
me personally, and I think it has been for lots of people. And there was great clarity and wisdom and foresight that came out of that session. So thank you.
Beautiful. I'm really, really happy to hear that. And that clear seeing is such a beautiful expression of what we can expect with this movement into Aquarius of these two teachers, these two faces of God, Jupiter, Saturn. So you had also talked about the hope that many of us lost in 2020, that feeling that the benevolent, everything's going to be okay, even when we're in crisis, that feeling that many of us have grown to rely on. I think each in our own way, we all had a kind of crisis of faith in 2020 because that particular face of God was less visible to us. And that is symbolically represented in astrological terms by the fact that Jupiter, that benevolent shining face, was in a very depleted and weak position all year. So normally in the sign of Capricorn, he's in a weak position. We lived through that 1 year out of every 12. But this was really emphasized in 2020 because he was there with these more challenging archetypal forces of Saturn and Pluto all together. So his light really was overshadowed at many times throughout the year last year. So that's where that common experience of the kind of the wind coming out of our sails and the loss of hope in a crisis that we've seen around us and each of us has felt within at one time or another over the last year, that's how that's mirrored in the sky. And it sounds like the experience that you had that evening may have been actually when Jupiter was just ingressing, just entering into the sign of Aquarius after his long slog through Capricorn. So Jupiter in Aquarius, still not in his totally happy place, but he has so much more room to shine. And that clear light, he's known as the great benefic. He's the lightest, brightest planet that we can see with our eyes in the sky. He is that clear light.
It was so wonderful to run out in the evening and
Yeah.
see, you know,
Yeah.
those together. And it was just
It
like
was,
I was cheering, literally.
yeah, I know, right? It was truly magical to see that. It was, I'm always so grateful for my relationship with the living sky and being able to look out there and feel that energy from the planets. But this was extraordinary. And it was wonderful to see how many people were engaged with that energy and how many people got to share in that thing that I get to do most days, just to go out and commune with the planets and the light and the energy that they're sending us and get a sense of the transmission of that archetypal force that does come through the light that they reflect back to us through some kind of magical sacred process. We really do feel that when we look at the planets in the sky and that great conjunction. It was so great to see so many people getting out there under the living sky and seeing that and receiving that light and responding to it, even if they don't know anything about astronomy or astrology, still feeling that importance and sacred significance of that meetup. That we, even though it happens every 20 years, we rarely get to see it because the conditions, the astronomical conditions, aren't always right for us to actually witness that conjunction. So it's very special, a once in a lifetime thing for many people. And coming as this bright light, like literally the light at the end of the tunnel, right? The bright light after the trials of last year. So it wasn't just that they were coming together, it was they were coming together in this very new place at the very beginning of Aquarius. So moving out of that hard slog of Capricorn, and you guys have heard me say this over and over again about climbing the rock face, right? That we did with Capricorn, and then bursting into onto the mountaintop. And that I keep saying clear light. It's not exactly what you said. I'm saying clear light because we talk about that in Tibetan Buddhism, the clear light, katok. It's the clear light of knowing and seeing on a deep soul level. But it's the same thing as the experience that you're describing. So that's our entrance into this year. But as we can all see and feel, this is it's not just that all our problems are resolved with this new energy. It's that there's new work to be done. And one of the things that has become clear is the nature of that work. So last year being about like we've been saying, putting on your big girl pants and growing up in the ways that you need to grow up. And we've all been doing that. There is a refreshment and a reinfusion of new energy and new vision as we begin this year of 2021. But part of that new vision is getting very, very painfully clear on what the issues still are, which has been dramatically playing out before our eyes in the news. And probably for each of us personally as well. Because remembering that as the planets mirror interior experience, also what happens in the human family is mirroring our individual experiences. It's all part of the same energy. So what we see outside of us, somewhere within ourselves, that same conflict is playing out. So here we are. It's been the new year for a while. We had the great conjunction and the winter solstice, but this is the first new moon of 2021. And it's in the sign of Capricorn, and it's at a very important degree of Capricorn in terms of recent astrology, recent history, which is 23, which is very close to that place where Saturn met up with Pluto. So that the riverbanks, the harsh teacher, structure builder, grower, upper face of God of Saturn at the beginning of 2020 met up with Pluto, the Lord of the Shadows, the Lord of Death. No need to review what has ensued as a reflection of that. So we're in this interesting position with this new moon, with the sun and moon, our two lights, meeting up at that same place in the zodiac that Saturn met Pluto at the beginning of 2020. We're looking backward, but looking forward at the same time. And that point of darkness is being illuminated. So as that darkness is illuminated, we feel the relief, we feel the release, we feel the hope, the infusion of hope that allows us to move forward. And also we can see, perhaps for the first time, really clearly what needs to be healed, what the problems are. Mm-hmm. So that's where we're sitting with this really potent new moon, which also is conjunct Pluto. So Pluto is still there offering what he offers, which is an insight into power structures, an awareness of our own shadow work, some fear and overwhelm that comes just with the energy of Pluto, but remembering that the heart of that energy is transformation. So it's a really...
How does this square with you or with, astrology? To me, what it feels like 2020 and what Saturn's role was in this past year was to help me understand where I source or place my power center. Yeah. And to look at all the ways that I have fragmented, or I think I will be saying we as people have fragmented ourselves and placed power in different groups or organizations or false gods, you could say, or false idols, or people who proclaim to have power that we want, and things like that. And then to really see before how if once you give your power away to and very much so, at least in this country, it's giving we've done this for hundreds of years
Yeah.
where we've given our power away to
Yeah.
white, mainly men, you know,
Yep.
and we're being forced this year to see what happens when you do that year after year, decade after decade, century after century, that power imbalance.
Yeah.
And in a lot of ways, we've pushed it out of sight.
Yes.
A lot of people still feel it and experience it. If you're a person of color, you still knew it was there. But the
Yeah.
rest of us were kind of like, oh no, things are better, you know.
Yeah.
And this year went like, oh, you
Yeah.
need,
There's nowhere to hide. There's
yeah,
nowhere to hide.
yeah. And
Um,
that's what this really is like. Oh,
yeah.
you want to really see what it looks like and how ugly it gets when we
Yeah.
frame ourselves and we live from a fear-based place and we give our power to someone who really actually is only in it for themselves and retaining their own power, or a group that's
Yeah.
really only about retaining power, but they've co-opted you,
Yeah.
because, and part of it is, but it always comes back to this. You have to take self-responsibility for
Yeah.
how did I give that over? And it's
Yeah.
so
That's
work
exactly it.
is taking, agency over self.
Yeah. There's so much that goes with that idea of taking responsibility. It is doing the things that you have to do in the world, but it's so much more than that, especially when we put it in terms of our citizenship, which it very much is for. So as you guys know, I'm in Canada. I grew up half American, half Canadian. I'm still half American, half Canadian. So I'm in this really interesting position of seeing it from the outside and the inside, and feeling it from the outside and the inside, which is really kind of Aquarian, that dual citizenship idea. But Saturn, Pluto, yes, the lessons of 2020, and taking those ideas of power and responsibility and putting them together, or structure. And I mean, there's so many keywords that go with both of those planets, but that idea of taking responsibility being not just those external forms of responsibility anymore, but like you so eloquently said, finding your center and seeing clearly from it. And seeing, I mean, Pluto is such an interesting archetype. He's scary and he's dark and he's the Lord of Death, but he also, as the ruler of the underworld, and if we think of underworld as a metaphor for our own unconscious minds, our own unconscious desires, all of the literal and psychological wealth that is hidden underneath the earth, as well as all the power that's hidden there. It's such a rich and interesting archetype, and it's not all negative. But thinking of those two forces together, our structures, and Saturn is our institutional structures as well, right? As well as our internal structures and our personal life structures, meeting with this Lord of the underworld. So it's the exposure and transformation and dismantling of power structures. We still have so much work to do this year. And there's the caveat that I have about this year is something I'd like everyone to bear in mind. And it has to do with the nodes of fate. And I won't go into a long thing about that. I just want to tell you what it means for each of us. We are exposing the power structures at a time when many people are vulnerable around what is real. Saturn is reality. What is real and what is not. The nodes in Sag Gemini mean that there's a lot of confusion about what's true. And we see this we see it in our own communities, right, Megan, in the yoga community and in the astrology community. There's people who are literally losing their minds and following really, really damaging conspiracy theories. And it's been really hard for me to manage that, just seeing that in my own community. We see it in our own sort of quote unquote alternative environment, just as much as we see it on the far right. Mm-hmm. And it's this weird balancing that we'll be doing this year between the grounded reality of Saturn, just like getting to what's real, the unquestionable truth, because it's the physical reality of things, the structural reality of things, but still being in this mental and emotional environment. And a lot of this is trauma based too, right? It's really natural for us as humans to need certainty and to find it in delusion just because we were so traumatized, and we need to find certainty. And we're seeing that play out before our eyes. These things that we thought we were immune to as these wonderful, wise contemporary people, these mass delusions that have overtaken people. So there's a really very real danger that continues for each of us for the rest of this year as we get excited about moving into new areas and expanding our thinking and wanting to rebuild and wanting to look at the structures that are and get rid of the ones that aren't working. Just like last year, our primary project was getting really serious and responsible in growing ourselves up. One of our primary projects this year is to maintain our psychological and mental stability. So again, relying on that inner structure, that inner core of groundedness that we built last year as we move into this airy, more volatile, more changeable, energetic environment this year.
What to try to pull us out of that?
Oh, one would hope, because this is the way, this is the elegant system of astrology, that hopefully the lessons that we learn within one sign we can apply in the next. And the Capricorn lessons are about learning what grounds us and what structures we're safe in, so that then when we move out into the kind of wildness of Aquarius, which is about individuality and about big humanitarian ideals, and it's very airy, and it's not very grounded emotionally or physically. As we move out into that, and that's the innovation that's going to bring us new structures, but we can't forget the structures that we've rooted into over the last year, which we've been thrown back onto our internal structures to root into as we've watched exterior structures crumble. I just want to acknowledge this this really disturbing phenomenon of the conspiracy theory. In the middle of this conversation, I want to acknowledge that, because I do find that my own language as an astrologer strays close to what some of that language sounds like. So I really feel like I want to take every opportunity to clarify my position in the work that I do as being, I'm a practical Taurus. I like to give people tools they can use in real life. I work with archetypal forces, so I use big, dramatic, mythic language. But when I say something like Saturn Pluto is having us expose the underlying power structures, that, when I say that, I mean that in a very practical way, that we are looking at the things that don't work in our government. We're looking at policing that doesn't work. We're looking at a voting system that doesn't work. We're looking at very real structures that we already know about, and we're seeing the ways that they don't work. So and all of us are vulnerable right now to these kind of big mythic ideas, because they serve us in a certain way in our spirituality, and we see them playing out in the world. But I would hope that everyone can find that inner core to stay grounded with what's real in front of us, what's tangible, what we know, and allowing ourselves to expand from there into new structures. Because
Are you saying, Bronwyn, that people who believe that the election was stolen, for example, they're kind of relying on, they're kind of coming at the same thing, just from a different way, or what? How do I want to say it? They are, they believe that the truth that needs to be exposed is that the election was stolen. You know,
right. Yes, so we're all working with the same energy and the same pressures.
Mm-hmm.
But what we've lost with the combination of the energies that are working on us, the fact that we've been through a major shared trauma, which I think it's going to take years for us to recover from.
Mm-hmm.
We're all experiencing PTSD to a certain level. And for those of us like myself, who has actually worked with PTSD in my own life and has some background in my own world about what trauma work looks like, it puts me ahead of the game. But So even just before I loop the astrology in, just speaking about the collective trauma and loss and grief that we've been through because of the pandemic, not to mention so many other things that are affecting us, including all of these, murders because of police brutality and many things that have happened and been happening, but specifically in 2020, the mass trauma of COVID. All of us have been affected by that. And the more grounded we are in ourselves, the more experienced we are with what trauma work looks like, or at least if we're intuitively able or psychological, because of our own innate psychological stability or the work that we've done, able to ground in the reality of ourselves and have that. It's really a privilege that we're talking about. Those of us that are privileged to feel psychologically safe within ourselves and within our communities and within our families have weathered this better with our psyches and our minds, not having to seek out other areas of safety. Because I think I do not mean to criticize anyone who has grasped on to something that seemed like a plausible reality in order to explain what's happening in the world and in order to survive. These are natural human adaptations. This is how we psychologically adapt to trauma. And if we don't have that stability within for whatever reason, because of our own personal traumas, because of a structure that hasn't afforded us any safety, maybe we've lost our home. There's so many different reasons, both structural and personal, that have led us to not be able to cope with the trauma. Something comes along that looks like a savior, whether it's Donald Trump or a love and light kind of looking conspiracy theory about how I don't even know what all of this stuff is, but I know there's stuff about it's just crazy. Some of it is just flat out crazy from my perspective. But it's that natural human impulse to grasp onto beliefs that make sense out of a reality that's traumatizing us. And we can see this both in the far right and in the alternative realms. And what I want to emphasize is that this is something that's not just kooky, it's actually dangerous. And we've seen with our eyes just how dangerous this last week. It's physically dangerous to all of us for our thinking to get so traumatized that it's so out of touch with reality. And I would hope that everyone would be able to really take the opportunity that's been given to us by the astrology of this year, which is so much about rethinking. Yes, we have to do that external rethinking of our structures because clearly they've been exposed to be inadequate policing, inadequate public health, inadequate voting system. It's inadequate. We need better. We deserve better. So we have to rethink that, but we have to rethink it with clear heads. And that's what the astrology is this year. That's the tightrope we'll be walking. Pulling ourselves out of this world where there's facts and alternative facts, and that's something real, back into a world where there's facts and there's fiction. Remember that? Remember when the opposite of facts was fiction and not some other facts that aren't true?
Yeah. But they are true if you believe that.
They are true if you believe it. And trust me, I know that on some level, we all create our own reality. I know that there's deep problems with the way that we build human society. I'm not denying any of that. I'm saying that we've arrived at a dangerous threshold with the way that we think about that. And we grasp at leadership because we've had a void of leadership. So the challenge this year is a more internal challenge that we will see externalized in the world around us as we move through all this air, because air is all about thinking and belief. With the nodes in Sagittarius, wisdom, and Gemini, information, we're really going to be sorting through a lot of our own belief systems, how our belief systems have been pulled and tugged and traumatized by what we've gone through this year, and the places where we may have fallen into something that is unwittingly a dangerous way of thinking. Whether it's as extreme as going down a huge conspiracy theory rabbit hole and becoming a QAnon person and which has happened to some people that I love.
Mhm.
Or whether it's less extreme and just like the kind of thing that you're talking about, Megan, where we've had a loss of hope and we need to rebuild hope back into the way we think about the world. But it's this idea of thinking and rethinking and beliefs and values. And we'll see this publicly and we'll find it personally. It's a big shift from just the basic um, financial and personal survival that was first and foremost in our minds last year and really didn't leave a lot of room for anything else.
Mhm.
Now we're going to be doing that
But
really important work of starting to ground ourselves in reality again with our minds.
I was just going to say the other danger place I think we could go is really trying to rebuild or reinstitute what was before.
Yes, and
Well,
that's
for
equally dangerous.
that
Yeah.
was safe because it was working for me. And
Also a natural trauma response just to run back to the safe bad thing.
yep, yeah,
It's bad and it's not safe, but it's familiar, so it feels safe.
mhm,
Really, we can all do ourselves a favor by learning about trauma response. Even if you don't think you're traumatized, a lot of people around you are traumatized.
yeah,
And learning, because that's a reality too. There are certain things that are hallmarks of trauma response. And we're seeing collective trauma. So it's a really helpful way to educate yourself about how everybody's behaving right now, and also to cultivate compassion and find ways to talk to people that have gone way far down the rabbit hole that we want them back in our lives. And
mhm,
we have to find ways to, like a friend of mine was saying to me today, this word depolarize.
mhm,
Now, mind you, I'm not saying that we all need to come together and find middle ground. It's too soon for that. But there is this long-term work of depolarization where we work eventually towards a stable middle ground. I don't think that middle ground really exists right now, but it is something we need to work towards.
mhm.
And the astrology of the year supports that.
Okay.
But it's a matter of taking care of ourselves in a different way, really taking care of our mental health,
Mhm.
taking such good care of our mental health, because we're out of the woods, but there's a whole other woods that we don't even really know we're in. And it's a mental and psychological one. And that's what we're going to be seeing play out this year.
Do you think a big part of that is making the body mind connection and really realizing that you will feel safe if you don't let your thoughts and emotions go off in a way that feels disconnected from your body? And
100%.
your body and your thoughts and your emotions are informing your experience in your body, and
Yeah.
conversely, your experience in your body is informing your thoughts and your emotions. So
Yes.
pull it all together, and dare I say, yoga is a beautiful and meditation are a great way to do that.
Our yoga practice has never been more important because it's exactly that, grounding ourselves in the reality of the moment and the reality of the body. Some realities are non-negotiable. The body in the moment, it is what it is.
Mhm.
There's That's it. That's
And
the
it's
only.
so wise, and it can absolutely make you feel
Yes.
safe. No matter
100%.
what your maybe your body isn't in optimal health right now, but you still, if you are in it, you will feel safe.
Yes. Oh, that's beautiful. And that's it. And it's really the antidote to all of the difficulties of this year,
Yeah.
is that cultivating that resilient groundedness. And it's so simple to
Hmm.
just show up present in the body. And I don't know anything that does that better than yoga and dance. Those
Hmm.
have been my saviors again and again in my life because it brings me right into the present moment, right into the reality of my body, whatever that reality is, whether it's health or illness or fitness or lack of fitness, it doesn't matter. It's not about that. It's not about reaching that ideal. It's like you said, it's just about coming down into the reality of the body and knowing you're safe there. And you
Yeah.
are safe, no
It's
matter what else is going
don't
on.
know, or what we're shunning or looking away from
Yeah.
or denying as um, our true awareness,
Yeah.
that really lurks in the corners and wreaks havoc
Totally.
on our
Yeah.
mental health and on our
Yeah.
emotional state. So
Yeah.
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 So
So all of those grounding practices.
so I listened, as I usually do, to your Venus Rising podcast, and I'm going to put a link to those
Great.
in this month's or in this episode. And I just encourage people to listen to that. They're deep dives into
Yeah,
the,
and once a week.
yeah, once a week into the minutia of each day,
Yeah.
and
We need
sometimes,
all the support we could get this year.
yep, yeah.
Yeah.
And as I was listening to it, I was like, okay, sounds like Monday is a day to get through. And then
Yeah.
then I listened to Tuesday and I thought, well, no, we got to get through Monday and Tuesday.
It's a
Wednesday,
bit of a week this
got to get
week.
through Monday, Tuesday.
And Wednesday and Thursday. And
Right.
then we start to feel a little bit better. But yeah, we do break it down day by day and kind of give you a sense of what to look forward to.
Yeah.
So the new moon today, or yesterday, if you're listening, I'm not sure exactly when this will post, but we're in that Capricorn new moon, looking forward and looking back. It's a pretty intense full moon, new moon, excuse me. But because of the strength of this really strong, energetic Capricorn gives us the ability to build structures. It's such a good time to be beginning to implement, get into writing, into some really tangible form your intentions for this year. So it's a good moon for setting intentions, really good, especially around the safe structures that we want to build into our lives and our own capacity for transformation, and our ambitions for the coming year too, because as well as all of these very serious things that we've been talking about, there's wonderful opportunity this year for expanding our work in the world and for expanding our creativity and really for expanding whatever area of your life it is that has felt so constricted over the last year or so. And again, the challenge, as Megan pointed out, will be building something that we really want to build, not just running back to the safety of the familiar structure, but there's so much opportunity for expansion this year and creativity. The key being that flexibility and staying grounded in super good physical self-care and staying in the present moment, taking just exquisite care of ourselves. Yeah, and being prepared to
So what you,
pivot.
yeah. So I've learned to not like that word, Bronwyn, pivot.
Oh, I know.
Pivot is a 4-letter word after
It
2020.
totally is. It totally is.
Yeah.
I've got enough placements in Taurus where I don't love that word anyway. Well, I like to just sit where I am and have that be all good. But yeah, we need to work on our pivoting skills. It's just a reality, especially in February, June, and December of this year. But I'll be back with you before even our first big pivot, so we'll be able to anticipate some of that as we go forward.
When you say that the theme is really radical self-care or
Yeah.
extreme self-care, can you talk a little bit more about that? I'm thinking
Yeah.
about the um, person who's, at home, financially strapped with a house full of kids and who aren't going to school and don't have
Oh
money
my gosh.
to
So
pay.
many of us. Yeah.
Yeah. And it really is a privilege to be able to create a daily routine for you where you
Yeah.
build in
Yeah.
self-care.
Yeah. It really is. And even leaving aside investing in anything you might do for your self-care, whether it's online yoga classes or leaving aside that there's privilege involved in that, just the privilege of time, especially right now.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I think this term self-care has gotten sort of to be used for like going to a spa day, or
Yeah.
I'm pulling this back to, the term self-care first came about and talking about people who are full-time caregivers, and how when you're giving so much to other people, just meeting your own basic needs becomes really important. So the origins of that term self-care are more about meeting your own basic needs in a time of crisis. And I'm thinking about our need to meet our basic psychological needs during this what continuing crisis, because everything didn't just go away because the calendar changed. So I don't know what that looks like in individual lives, but I know that the kind of self-care that I'm talking about is finding inner psychological stability. So whatever small adjustments, even if all you can make are small adjustments, understanding that it's a priority, that it's no longer something that you can sacrifice in order to be there 100% for your kids in their homeschooling, or to be able to work because your partner is still laid off. um, Speaking about my own situation, I have had to really increase my income because of my partner's income being affected by COVID. And we all can get really caught up in that and say, well, if my eating or my rest goes a little bit by the wayside, we're all going to have a little less flex with that. So more rest, more attention to your own, if you know what your own psychological areas of pressure are, if you're prone to anxiety, if you're prone to depression, do those things that you know you need to do to ward that off, because this is a lot of energy coming in all at once, and it's obvious in just the day-to-day work of rebuilding society that this is a lot of pressure, but also archetypally, from the perspective that I'm coming from, astrologically, energetically, there's a lot of new energy coming in. It's a bit volatile. It has this electrical quality. So, as hackneyed as it is, a salt bath, I'm not kidding. If you can take 15 minutes a day to take a salt bath, it does all kinds of good things for you.
I think too, like doing something every day, even if it's for 10 or 15 minutes,
the
versus
consistency.
Saturday, I'm gonna blow out of the house and
No.
what's happening there away, and do some kind of 3 or 4 hour thing.
Yeah.
Be better
No.
to do a standard thing. And when you're doing it, to be very, very present to it. And even the simple things of like, I'll like right before I eat, I'm like looking at my food and having gratitude for the food,
It's
and
huge. Yeah.
saying, I'm eating now. I am serving my body by eating.
Yeah.
At
Yeah.
night,
That's
I lift
beautiful.
my feet up off the floor to get into my bed. I'm like, I'm resting now. I'm taking
Yeah.
myself into the state of rest. And then when I wake up, I acknowledge that I've had,
Yeah.
6 hours of okay sleep. No.
Yeah. Right.
And so it's just like, it's not rocket science things. It isn't getting your, a pedicure. It isn't getting a facial. I mean, if you can do those things, yay you. But if those really are not the
The
things,
little daily minutia.
body,
Yeah. Yeah.
yourself in your life, and pull those fragmented parts together again.
I like that image of pulling the fragments together again, because that is what we're doing, and they're going to feel like they're blowing in the wind a little bit. And remembering that caring for ourselves isn't always doing something, sometimes it's not doing something.
Yeah.
So maybe like one less glass of wine in the evening, or one less cup of coffee in the morning. I've cut my coffee way back. I'm trying to do just 1 cup a day now. And the scrolling, right? The doom scrolling. And I'm not saying fast on all of these things. We need our supports, whatever. Have your coffee, but just be aware. Be aware. If anxiety is your thing and you're a little more prone to that, no, maybe you can't book off for a day-long virtual retreat, but maybe you can have one less cup of coffee, and that kind of stuff adds up over time.
Yeah. And a
In
little
a
less.
bigger way, I think, sometimes than the once in a while. Although it's great to be able to do that stuff too. But I'm just encouraging that there are little tiny things that don't even take time that we can do each day. Like you're saying, honoring the things you are doing for yourself, being grateful for our food, consciously resting and feeding ourselves, and a little less of the screens, and opening up a tiny bit of space for the mind. And the thing about the coffee, just all year we're going to be a little overstimulated. So if there's things in your diet that are kind of stimulating, or things in your environment, bright lights or screens that are on, the more peace you can bring into your home, as far as low lighting and drinking chamomile maybe instead of that black tea in the afternoon, and turning off the TV at an earlier hour. Little things that bring more softness and peace into your environment over the course of the year are going to add up to a lot, because our nervous systems are going to be feeling a little more inflamed, and we want to be able to think clearly. So it's those little pieces of self-care. It doesn't have to be a big deal. It doesn't have to cost either time or money.
Mhm.
Yeah. In fact, I think the most important ones for right now are the ones that aren't a big investment of time and money. Just an investment, a conscious investment in self.
So is that the new moon intention or what we should be setting for ourselves this with
I
it?
think that's an important piece of it, to think about the habits that create the new structures we want to live into. I think that there's an element of optimism in this new moon, even though it's got some intense energy. And if we can toggle back and forth between that practical self-care and practical um, thinking ahead about structures, and also allowing some space for beginning to dream into that new thing, like you're talking about, that light that's coming in and giving you that sense of universal support that's been a bit lacking. And because we've all kind of been locked down, some of us literally locked down, we don't want to lose the capacity to have hopefulness and big visions and just moments of carelessness. And I mean that in the sense of being carefree, even just for a moment. So if we can weave some of that into our new moon intentions too. It's all been so serious lately, and it's going to continue to be serious on and off. But there's some nice expansiveness that's coming in this year that allows us time to not be so serious. And I'd love it if you'd think about that for your new moon intentions too. Just where can you expand? Where can you play? Where can you open up open up space for dreams again in your life? It's so important. It feeds us through these more serious times.
Yeah. Bronwyn, thank you. We'll see you in February.
Thanks, Megan.
See you soon. Bye-bye.
Bye.